All right, everyone, buckle up because we are diving deep today. We're talking verse.
Verse, yeah, Epic Games' new programming language. It's causing quite a stir.
Yeah, big deal, right? I mean, people are saying this could totally change how we create in Fortnite.
Yeah, for sure.
We're digging into the nitty-gritty, the verse language quick reference.
Yes, the quick reference.
It's a beast, though. It's
Yeah.
dense. Luckily, we've got some, like, real-world code examples to help, make sense of it all.
Yeah, definitely. It's one thing to read the theory, it's another to actually see it in action.
Exactly. Show me the code. So before we get lost in the weeds, big picture, what is verse? Why all the hype?
So at its core, Verse is a scripting language, right? But it's made specifically for Fortnite creative. Think of it like it's a toolbox, right, for creating game logic inside Fortnite. You control events, you move objects around. Basically, you can build interactive experiences within Fortnite.
So you're saying even someone just starting out with verse, they could make some pretty significant changes.
Oh, absolutely. And the cool part is the logic you build. It's not stuck in just one creation. You can take those scripts, that code, and use it again and again across different projects.
All right. I like the sound of that. Very efficient. So the quick reference jumps right into something called expressions, which are those the words and phrases that, you use to write in verse?
Yeah, think of them as the building blocks, right, of the language. Every single expression you write, no matter how simple or crazy complex, it's going to produce a value. And that value is what the game understands. It's how you tell the game what to do.
So it's all about giving instructions, and then the game takes those instructions and does its thing.
Exactly. It's all about cause and effect. You write the cause, verse makes the effect happen in-game.
All right, so give me a really basic example, something from the documentation that shows how this works.
Sure. So they have this if.else statement, right? Let's say you've got a variable, call it my number.
My number, all right.
Got it. This if.else statement can check if that number is bigger than 5. If it is, boom, code spits out big. If not, you get small.
Big or small. I like it. Simple, but I see where this is going. So depending on that one comparison, bigger than 5 or not, you can make completely different things happen in the game.
Exactly. That's what we call conditional logic. Makes the game dynamic, it can react to what's happening.
That's awesome. Okay. Now, I'm all about keeping things organized, and I noticed the guide mentions adding comments to the code. Is that just for our own sanity, or is there more to it?
It's a good habit for sure. Helps keep things straight. You can basically write notes to yourself in plain English, and the game just ignores it all.
Okay, so far so good. But why are there a bunch of different ways to do comments? Single line, multi-line? I mean, isn't that a bit much?
Well, think about it this way. Let's say you're working on a really, really tricky bit of code, and you want to try something new, a new approach, but you don't want to just delete what you already have. Right. That's where these nested block comments come in. You can temporarily comment out whole sections of code.
So it's like a safety net.
Yeah, exactly. You can experiment without, breaking everything.
I like that. Okay, so notes are in order. Safety net is on. Let's get back to the building blocks. Variables and constants. Those sound pretty self-explanatory.
They're pretty much what they sound like. It's how really any programming language deals with information, data, like little containers.
Right, containers make sense.
A constant, it's like the name suggests, holds a fixed value. It never changes during the game.
So something like, I don't know, the name of your game world.
Exactly. Or the maximum number of players you can have. Set it once, and it stays that way.
Makes sense. So then variables, those are more, flexible?
Way more flexible. They can change as the game goes on. The document gives this example of player speed.
Player speed, right.
That could go up or down based on, power-ups they collect, the terrain, all sorts of stuff.
Okay. So player health, their score, what's in their inventory. That's all variables, right?
You got it. They make the game world dynamic. Constants set the stage. Variables make it come alive.
This is starting to click now. Okay, here's where I usually start to feel a bit lost of the different types of data, like logic, int, float, string. Honestly, it's a lot to process.
Oh, I feel you. It can seem overwhelming, but think of it like categories, right? It's just how Verse organizes information, different tools for different jobs.
Okay, so break it down for me. What are these tools and what do they do?
All right, so logic. This one's all about true or false. Is this thing true or not?
Okay.
Essential for game logic. Is the door open? Did the player grab that key? That kind of stuff.
Right. I can see how that'd be super useful. What about the others?
Int, short for integer. That one's all about whole numbers. So Player scores, ammo counts, how many lives they have left, that kind of thing.
Right, that makes sense. Float, though. Does that like have to do with water levels or something?
Aha, no, not quite. Float is for numbers with decimals, when you need to be really precise. Player speed, damage calculations, anything like that.
So it's like if int is using whole blocks, float is like having those little measuring tools, to be really exact.
Perfect analogy. Now, last one in this group, string. That one handles text. Player names, dialogue, messages of the game, all of that. And get this, verse even supports emojis inside strings.
No way. Emojis. That's amazing. Got to add some personality.
Yeah.
Okay, I noticed there's also a message type. Is that like a special kind of string just for, communication?
You're catching on quick. The message type is specifically for something called localization, which is huge for a game like Fortnite with players all over the world. Basically, it makes it super easy to translate everything into different languages.
Wow, that is incredibly thoughtful. It's amazing how verse seems to handle these bigger picture elements so well.
And we're just scratching the surface. There are even more specialized types like rational. It makes sure division is always precise, even with really big or really small numbers.
Okay, my brain is officially full. I need a minute to process all these different types. But before we move on, I'm thinking about all this data, all these individual pieces. How do you organize it all? Okay, I think I've recovered from that data dump. It's wild how verse gives you so many ways to label and organize stuff, but I'm picturing all these individual variables and constants just floating around. How do you, I don't know, wrangle them all into something that makes sense?
It's like having ingredients but no recipe.
You're spot on. You need a way to bring that data together to give it structure, and that's where container types come in.
Container types, okay.
Yeah, think of them like specialized containers, each one designed to hold multiple values, so you can create more complex data structures.
Okay, I'm listening. Which one of these container types is the most interesting?
Well, for game development especially, the option type is pretty fascinating. It's unique because it can either hold a value or it can be empty.
Empty. Me like a chest in Fortnite that might have loot, or it might just be totally empty.
Exactly. Great analogy. The documentation uses this example, maybe Ember. It's basically saying, hey, there could be a number here, but there might not be, so be ready for either one.
That's so smart. I mean, games are full of uncertainty, right? A player might grab an item or they might miss it completely. That option type seems like a really elegant way to deal with that maybe factor. Are there other types that are, I don't know, more straightforward?
For sure. You've got arrays, which are like your good old-fashioned ordered lists. So imagine you want to store all the players in your game and keep track of like the order they joined in. Arrays your go-to.
So it's all about maintaining a specific order. What about when you need to store like related info, but not necessarily in a list?
Tuples are your friend in that case. They're containers too, but here's the difference. They hold a fixed set of values, and those values can be different types.
Different types, okay?
Yeah, so like, let's say you want to store a player's name, which would be a string, along with your score, which is an integer. Tuple can handle that, no problem.
So it's like a little package of data, each piece with its own meaning, really useful for keeping things together. But what if you need to find a specific value based on a key? Sort of like, when you look up a word in a dictionary to find its definition.
You're thinking like a programmer already. And yeah, Verse has got you covered there too. That's where maps come in. They're essentially dictionaries pairing keys with values.
Give me a game example, make it click.
Okay, picture a player's inventory. The item name could be the key, and the quantity of that item they have, that's the value.
This is making so much sense now. It's like Verse gives you all these ways to sort and organize and access data, which makes it so much easier to build those complex systems. But we've been talking about using Verse's built-in data types. What if you want to invent something totally new, something specific to your game? Is that even possible?
Now that's where Verse gets really exciting. You can create your own custom data types using enums and structs.
Enums and structs. Okay, those sound powerful, but slow down. Teach me. What are enums all about?
So imagine you're making a game with different difficulty settings. Easy, medium, hard. An enum lets you define those as separate named values, like creating a custom type just for difficulty levels.
So instead of using strings or numbers, which can be kind of vague, you have these clear, defined options right in the code.
Exactly. And the documentation actually visually lays out how enums work, which is really helpful. But enums are just the start. Let's say you need an even more complex data structure. That's where you bring in the structs.
Okay, lay it on me. What makes structs so special?
A struct lets you group related variables together to make like a custom blueprint for a specific type of object in your game.
Okay, I'm following.
So let's say you need to keep track of a player's position in a 3D world, right? You could create a coordinates struct with variables for the X, Y, and Z coordinates, each holding a float for super accuracy.
So instead of having these coordinates all over the place in my code, I can neatly package them into a coordinates object. Super organized.
Exactly. Structs make your code way easier to read, easier to manage, and less likely to have errors. And believe it or not, we can take this even further. Verse lets you create classes, which are like structs on steroids, with even more capabilities.
Classes.
Yeah.
All right, we're going deep now. What makes them so powerful? All right, classes. Lay it on me. We're going deep into verse territory now, right?
Think of classes as the ultimate blueprint for creating objects in your game world. They bring together data, those variables we talked about, and actions.
Actions. Okay, hold on. Back up a sec.
So actions in verse are defined by functions, and classes can have both data and functions all bundled together.
Okay, so it's like taking those structs and giving them like superpowers. They can hold info and do stuff.
You got it. Imagine you're making a game, right? And you've got these collectible power-ups. You could have a power-up class.
Okay, power-up class.
Inside that class, you have variables, right? To keep track of the power-up's type, how long it lasts, how it affects the player. But then you've also got functions within that same class.
To actually make the power-up do something.
Exactly. The functions define what happens when the power-up's collected, when it's activated, when it runs out, all of that.
So it's not just holding data, it's defining how that data interacts with the whole game world.
Wow. But I'm also thinking this could get really complex really fast, right? How do you keep track of all these classes, make sure they work together?
Well, Verse has this amazing thing called inheritance. It's like you create a new class called a subclass.
Subclass, okay.
And that subclass inherits everything from an existing class, but then you can add stuff to it or tweak it to make it unique.
Example time. I need an example. All right. Let's say it's an RPG, right? Different character classes like warriors, mages, archers. You could start with a basic character class.
Makes sense. A base template.
Right. It defines all the shared stuff like health, stamina, inventory. Then you create your warrior class, your mage class, your archer class.
And they all inherit from that basic character class.
Boom! They get all those base attributes automatically. But then you add on the special abilities, the unique stats that make each class distinct.
So it's like subclasses are like specialized versions. They inherit the core stuff, but they've got their own identity too. It's really clever.
Yeah.
Like a family tree for your code, showing how it all connects.
I like that. And just like with a blueprint, it's helpful to have a way to set things up right when you create a new object from it. That's where constructors come in.
Constructors. Okay, now I'm lost again. We're talking like construction workers here.
Yeah.
What's the verse definition?
Think of a constructor as a special function, one that runs automatically every time you create a new object from a class. It's your chance to set the initial values for everything.
So if I'm creating a new warrior from my warrior class,
The constructor would handle setting their starting health, stamina, maybe even equipping them with a basic sword, all that good stuff.
it's like the constructor's in charge of making sure that every new object, when it pops into the game, it's got all the right settings.
Nailed it. It's all about starting off on the right foot.
This is making so much sense. But I do have one more question. We've been talking a lot about individual classes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is there a way in Verse to like define shared behaviors, things that multiple classes can do even if they're not directly related?
That is an excellent question. And yes, Verse has got you covered. That's where interfaces come into play.
Interfaces. Uh-oh, sounds techie.
Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. An interface is like a contract. It outlines a set of functions that any class can choose to implement.
Okay, I'm gonna need a real-world example here.
Let's say you're designing a game with all sorts of interactive objects. Doors, chests, levers, you name it. You could create an interactable interface.
Interactable, okay.
And that interface would define functions like use, open, close, you get the idea. Then any class that represents an interactive object, it could implement that interface.
So no matter what the object does, if it's got that interactable interface, you know how to interact with it.
You got it. It creates consistency, makes your code more organized, easier to work with.
Man, the way all these pieces fit together is just...
Wow.
I'm seeing the potential here for creating some really incredible stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And the best part is we're just scratching the surface here. Verse is still being developed, which means even more cool features are on the way.
That's what I love about game development and tech in general. It's always evolving, always pushing the boundaries of what's possible. It's like, even with all this amazing stuff we've covered today, we're still just at the beginning of this incredible journey.
Exactly. And, the real magic happens when you start experimenting, when you take these building blocks and create something uniquely your own.
That's the beauty of it, right? So go forth, explore the Verse documentation, get creative, see what you can build.
And remember, there's a whole community of creators out there, all eager to share their knowledge, their creations, their passion for Verse. So don't be afraid to dive in, ask questions, and most importantly, have fun with it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Verse, everyone. Until next time.